Hello and welcome to the Venue Success Podcast. I am your host, Tirzah Caffee, and today I'm continuing season 1 with my friend and guest, Kalli Doubleday. I learned an interesting fact about Kalli as we were getting information about her in preparation for today, and this is just really fantastic. And further along in the interview, maybe we'll have time for you to tell us how you got this gig. But Kalli is the voice on the intro to the first season of the show Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders Making the Team. So you're going to have to tell us about that at some point in the show. That is quite the interesting fact. I'm sure that you always like you're at dinner parties and it's like, hey, I got a fun fact for you guys today.
It's a fun fact.
Two truths and a lie, right? Like,
Yep.
Which one?
Yep.
So it's really fun. I look forward to hearing more about your story in the show. But before we get started, it is time for crazy stories with Tirzah because people have lost their minds. So today is another story about something that happened in our bridal suite. So we all know, of course, that brides can enter their wedding day on various points in the spectrum of calm as a cucumber to absolutely losing their mind. And we had a bride that was very anxious in nature, and we were just doing everything that we could to keep the bridal suite peaceful, keep her calm. We knew that she was very high strung. So she was getting her hair and makeup done at the venue, and she looked beautiful. She looked beautiful. All the guests arrived. We got them seated. We're about 10 minutes before the wedding was to start. Now, to set the tone, our bridal suite used to be a bed and breakfast room. So it has this big, beautiful jacuzzi hot tub and big open concept bathroom and all this stuff. And my wedding planner goes upstairs to get her, to line her up to come down the aisle, right? It's just getting ready to start. And she walks in the bridal suite to see the woman in the bathtub. She had washed all of her makeup off. She had washed her hair, and she was a wet rat. I don't know what else to tell you. I'm sad to say I wasn't at this particular wedding, but my planner was messaging me, and she's like, oh my gosh, Tirzah, everyone's seated. She's taken off her dress. She's in the bath. She has to start all over. And my sound tech was, there at the sound booth, and all of a sudden he sees this woman in high heels just running across the property as fast as she can. They had called the hair and makeup artist, and they're like, come back. She hated her hair and makeup. You have to come back and start over. And literally the wedding was getting ready to start. I could tell you, in 30 years of doing weddings, this is the only time I've ever seen someone be so unstable that they did something like that. And she looked beautiful, but she just freaked out about how she looked. And so, needless to say, we let everybody get out of their seats, and it took another close to an hour to redo her hair and her makeup, and we eventually scooted the young lass down the aisle. But let me tell you something. When we talk about how people have lost their minds in weddings, it seems dramatic, but like these intellectual, incredible business women and whatever, like not just women, I'm just calling her out today, but like they turn into different people that, like, when they're planning their wedding, it's like this total out of body experience, I think, for some of them. And I don't understand it. I guess that's why they make shows like Bridezilla and things like that, because people just lose their minds. So anyway, everyone waited an hour. She did her hair and makeup again. But let me tell you, the whole rest of the day, all she could think about was how she looked. It was the only thing that was important to her. And it makes me sick even telling the story, because I think, what a shame. You had this beautiful wedding. All your friends or family are there, and all you could think about is yourself. I'm just like, oh my gosh. So anyway, that was definitely one for the books. After that, I thought, maybe I should remove this bathtub out of our bridal suite so this never happens again, because what a disaster. Anyway, so I know, Kalli, you probably have many stories, maybe not just like that, but those cocktail party stories where you could just make people's jaw drop with the things that you've seen.
course.
So anyway, I'm so excited to have you here today, Kalli. We are newer friends, but I was just telling her before we started the show today that it's so inspiring seeing people that have created the legacy, honestly, that you have, and being someone that is a little bit younger in the venue space, growing so quickly and being so successful. And this show, this podcast is, I think that's one of the great things about it is that we could come on here and we're just ordinary people that have been able to work hard and achieve success. And I'm so excited to hear your story today. So with that, tell us, Kalli, a little bit about yourself, your family, and your origin story. Why did you go into this? I know that you were in the education space before. What
Yes.
made you leave that career and come into this vastly different life? So take it away.
Okay, so yeah, thank you so much, Tirzah. I was an academic by training, so I'm a scholar. I love research. I spent 14 years of my life as a scientist. I worked in India. My primary focus was working in India on human tiger conflict. So trying to find ways to make sure that we have tigers here with us on Earth going forward. And then in Africa and other places, I was set to start working in California on grizzly bear work. It was kind of my next step in my career. And long story short, the professor track and the academic track, it was just coming to an end for many, many reasons. The economy and pay and all the things in California and living expenses, these things. But really at the heart of it was family. And I know so many venue owners will resonate with that. Um, in the background, it was really kind of a secret that in the background, while I was off working in India and getting a doctorate and all these things, I was also running wedding venues in the background. And it was actually a secret because a lot of my grants and a lot of my work didn't allow for additional income. It's kind of a weird scholarly thing. They want you to be focused on the work. But so I had always been running these venues. And the way I got into the business is when I got engaged, there were no places to get married. This was before the Texas explosion. And now I know it's, US wide explosion of venues, but we were 3, 4, 5 years before the explosion of venues. And at the time, there was just nowhere to get married except in the big cities. And that just wasn't going to work for us for other reasons. And so my mom said, okay, we've got this stunning piece of property that they wanted to retire on. It was a gift for my mom's birthday a few years before, and we spent all of our family time there. And I was begrudgingly like, absolutely not. Whatever y'all are thinking, shut it down. No, no, no. And the reason was I just thought, oh my gosh, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be delays. Like everyone's opinion, if this is my mom and dad's, future retirement property, they're going to be the ones who have say on everything. I was just like, oh my God, no, no, no. So, we keep going in the discussion and eventually I agree. So what I agreed to was my dad was like, okay, because it had gone many different varieties, and he said, okay, I'll need a tractor and car barn eventually. So why don't we just build that, and then we can easily transition that to a useful piece of our retirement property. I agreed, begrudgingly again. Okay, fine. So we build this place, and my dad owns a salvage yard. He's in the salvage industry. So our entire structure then and now is built out of repurposed materials. My mom is an antique lover and just a beautiful design eye. So when you add in kind of a scrapyard, junkyard, industrial vibe, which is my dad, and you add in a glamorous antique chandelier vibe, which is my mom, you get what is now called Sparrow Creek Ranch. So after we built it and we got married there, everybody wanted to get married there. My sister's friends, my friends, we had cousins get married there, and it just became its own thing. So my dad and I, who we've always worked together our entire lives in different ways, we kind of just one day, about 3 or 4 years into it, just said, okay, I guess like, should we get a contract together and, like put a website together? And it just was completely by accident. So that's how we got into the space. And then as an academic, and those who I think really succeed in this role, I love systems, I love data. And so my focus was always on building out a great experience for the client and answering questions before they ask them. And so I was able to continue to do that at other venues as I moved across the country or via Texas. And so I was able to step in where needed and either build the businesses, take my own systems and apply those to those places. And I've gone through various roles in that, whether that's the building process for others, whether that's just kind of a management on the day to day. Right now, I'm in a great place where I am actually I am in the process of purchasing a boutique resort. And so I have transitioned to a very high level director over Shiraz Garden. I have my team there. I'm watching, I'm looking, but I've stepped out of the day to day there. So I've got my hands in a few different spaces.
What a story. Okay, I have like so many questions already. So, when was that, the very first venue? So, the Sparrow Creek Ranch, when did that all?
2012, my wedding
Okay.
would have been the
Okay.
first wedding.
Okay.
As so many venue owners, especially in Texas, go, well, it was my wedding first, and then it just kept rolling. So 2012.
So, how many weddings are you having now at that venue?
We do specialize in weekend packages. So we don't have
Okay.
we're not in that 100
Yep.
plus category because
Yep.
we do
Yep.
really specialize our narrative, our packages around that. So we're kind of in that anywhere from the low end. I mean, the last 4 years have been very difficult for sure. Been
Yeah.
very difficult
Yeah.
because of COVID and all
Yeah.
of those things, but also, yes, the explosion in venues in our area.
It's so
There's,
true.
probably 400 to 500 venues, I would say, in our competitive area. So
Yes.
anyways, we're doing anywhere from, 48, I think, at the low end and about 65 at the high end.
That's really great though for a weekend space. I think that's really,
Yeah.
really awesome. So what made you feel like you wanted to go into the second venue? Like what was that process like? Because I know, scaling to your second one, I feel like is the hardest step. And
Yeah.
then going beyond that, you figured it out, you understand, how to transition even yourself and your role.
Hmm.
It's like going from one to two kids, right? And then after that, it's like, oh, I got
Got
this,
it. Yeah.
So what was that transition like? I
Yeah.
think that's so fascinating to me.
So the systems, I would say because that is something that I enjoy and I'm just incredibly particular about that. And I am a big advocate for using tools. I am not a big fan of coaches who say, oh, you should build everything on your own. I really love tools, just like this podcast, ability, and I just love tools. So for me, that's HoneyBook, and and those are for venue only spaces. Now I do use a different CRM for my spaces that are more services, but for a venue only, it's HoneyBook for me. So I was able to really build out the business pretty quickly for Shiraz Garden in terms of the website, the social, the marketing, all the internal contracts, all that good stuff. But the big struggle, of course, with the scaling was people. Of course, finding that team,
Yeah.
starting over your
Yeah.
scratch team was just so hard. And I had my oldest would have been, he would have been about 6 months whenever I started. And we opened during COVID. We opened January 2020. And then, of course, we all know what happened at the end of March 2020. So it was a rough first year. But I worked every single wedding, every single shift to create what we all have as our kind of checklists and protocols and videos. And so I worked every event, double shifts back to back, all that to build out the day of systems. And so I would say that was the
Yes.
hardest part, was just going, okay, I got to be the one. I am not high and mighty. This venue hasn't been running for multiple years. I got to go in there. I got to see the space in action. No one else can do this. And I'm the only one who has the eye to be able to work the event and then create those checklists for that property. And just that job role and deciding, well, how many people and at what time and when do they shift and overlap. So that was the hardest part, for sure.
No, oh my gosh. So I have such a mad respect for you already in just a few minutes because I feel there's a couple things. One, I get frustrated sometimes when I see venue owners that aren't willing to get down and dirty and do the hard day to day.
Yeah.
And I was interviewing someone a couple weeks ago, and she said, this is not a retirement gig.
No.
This is the hardest work of my life. And she said that, and I was just like, I feel so seen right now.
Yes.
I had this guy once, he was in the military in the special forces, and he came to me once, and it was a particularly difficult wedding. And he pulled me aside. I mean, he's like in his full uniform, right? And I was kind of afraid, to be honest. And he pulls me aside and he said, I have to tell you something, Tirzah. And he said, I would rather be in active combat than do your job. And I was like,
high stakes.
I'm like, I just thank you. A tear falls. I'm like, thank you.
Yes.
This is a really hard job. And sometimes it actually does feel like active combat. But just circling back to what you said, it is hard work, what we do.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, like, it all falls back on our shoulders, right? And so it is our responsibility to create systems and enforce them, which is actually, to me, harder than creating the system, is like actually making those employees that, there's going to be a fair amount of, it's a revolving door a little bit in our industry. So just getting those employees that want to stay. There's those ones are hard to find. But so tell me about the business model of these two venues and how they're different and kind of what your day-to-day role is at this point.
Sure. So I genuinely still love being a professor. I'll never shake that off. Even if I'm not in an actual classroom, I'm never going to shake it off. And I tease my couples, even at tours, when I am the person giving a tours, I'm like, I am type A. You should know this from the start. I'm going to be teaching you the whole way. We're going through this. And what I mean by that is exactly what you were just saying, Tirzah, is like enforcing your boundaries, enforcing your systems. Like a very easy example is I don't text. Like I don't text clients. And I know there's just constantly every day the wave of marketing and experts is you got to text, you got to do it. And I just refuse to do it. I refuse to do it. I think it opens the door for miscommunication, for lost opportunities. It's just not how I'm going to operate best. And so just this morning, I had a client say, or a potential client say, find us on Facebook and text, say, or message, I'm trying to submit a form and it's not working. And so I just send the form again because I just feel like at this age, they always say that, but they actually haven't tried to submit the form.
Yes.
And I'm like, absolutely. I just tested it. Here it is again. Easy, and it comes right through. And I'm like, oh my gosh, wonderful. And they still want to have that conversation in that third party. And I absolutely do not respond. I refuse to respond past that. I will only respond in that one way. But both models for Sparrow Creek Ranch and Shiraz Garden are very venue only type rentals. Now, my current goal that I'm working on this boutique resort, that's a full gamut of the catering and the planning and the florals, the whole deal, which is really exciting and fun because I have been in the venue only space. But one thing that I do add on that I have loved adding in the last couple of years is in-house coordination. And I know that's something that most venues, will laud as a great thing. And it is in so many ways because that does take a lot of pressure off of other team members, which I love. Trying to find those gals in a rural setting can be difficult. But having the venue only rental allows us to really focus on doing what we do best. And I take it very, very seriously. Something I would consider that I do that is different than others, and I hear this from my clients all the time, is I am almost trying to talk them out of booking my venue before they ever get to a tour. So what I mean by that is, I think it's the third step in my automated, emails is here's a full budget breakdown of what a general wedding for 150 is going to look like. And I understand this is probably a lot of sticker shock. These are numbers from my vendors. These are numbers from my weddings. And I get probably 10% fall off right away. Thank you so much. This was really helpful. And of course that 10% includes the ghosting as well. But the other 90 go, wow, this is incredibly helpful. This is so helpful. Now I'm not putting that on our website, but I want them, if they get to the inquiry phase, to be very clear. Because I've only had it once, Tirzah, and I'm sure you've been there. I feel like we've all been there at some point where you have a couple who books and then gets through the process and can't pay for it. They just can't get through the end. That's only happened to me once, and it was early on, and I was like, never again. Never again will I let it be unclear to a couple who wants to book with me what the whole package is going to look like. Now, I'm just the venue, so I'm not florals, I'm not photography, and so I'm trying to give them a range, but that's right away. I do the same with vendors and lodging and all of this. I've got these automated responses depending upon what they're looking for, trying to basically say, here's all the things you should consider. Now, of course, yes, a contract will come if you want to book and all that good stuff, but I really, really try to talk couples out of it almost before they get to a tour, because I, want that tour conversion to be really high, and I don't want them really to come to a tour with questions. I always laugh. I just kind of shared another reel yesterday. People ask often, what are the questions we should ask at a tour? You see it in the bride to bride groups. What should we ask a venue? What should we ask a venue? And my answer is kind of like, well, you shouldn't be asking a venue questions on your tour. You should be enjoying the venue on your tour. You should love the venue on your tour. But by the time they step in your doorway, whether that's because it's on your website or you're just sending it to them ahead of time, you should be giving them pricing, policies, considerations, all of that before they hit the doorstep, in my opinion.
I'm going to pause you here because I want to give a little nugget of education. I don't always do this, but I'm pretty sure you'll agree with me. But I am like nodding my head in so much agreement with what you're saying about pre-educating them. I actually think that it is the hardest part of sales is educating people, because so many venues are different. And for me, I get frustrated when I see people say, well, I'm all inclusive, and what that means to them is that they provide tables and chairs. And I'm just like, stop. That does not mean all inclusive. Like that is almost assumed nowadays that you're going to get a table and a chair at your venue. So, but what I wanted to just kind of circle back on is what you said about they should be there enjoying the space when they come. But and we are in full agreement with that, but what I see as the number one thing that disrupts that for them is when all of a sudden they bring mom and dad on either side and they haven't taken the time to read all of that glorious information that I've sent them ahead of time. Yes. So this is basically what we do when we find out, because they have to, as part of the tour process, they are letting us know exactly everyone that's coming. No surprises. You're not going to come with 10 people to your tour. That's just not going to happen. 6 at the max for us, because it's the couple and both sides of the parents. We don't feel that it would be right for us to tell the primary, contributors financially, that they can't come. So we let them come, but we make sure that they're educated. And we're like, hey, if your parents are coming, we would like you to forward this particular email. Here it is again. Please forward this to your parents. Please make sure that they read this pricing guide before you come, because we've already been talking for maybe 2 weeks before they come. Because we really are, same as you, big into vetting them, but also growing that trust factor with them before they come out. And you could do that fairly quickly. Now, which causes me to circle back to the texting thing and how you don't care for that. And I want to say to listeners, there is no right or wrong. You're going to see so many coaches out there, consultants, and all, not just in the venue space, but in the wedding industry in general, that are like, if you're not texting your people, you're not communicating the way that they want to. But here's the thing, that might be true. However, this is your business that you need to love, and you need to not burn out. And if texting makes your heart race and it's like stresses you out, you feel like, no, they have too much access to me, you need to do what lights your fire, or, doesn't make you, causes resistance and frustration for you. You shouldn't do those things, whether it's right or wrong. The proof's in the pudding. Are you selling weddings and making some money? I mean, that's really what matters. If you're making people email with you and they understand that that is what you prefer, then that's fine. We share the same, on the sales side of things, we do a lot of texting through our CRM, and it's just easier that way for us because of what we do. But when it gets to the planning stage, because we're fully all-inclusive, there is no texting.
Yes.
Absolutely no texting. The week of the wedding, if we feel like we want to and it's a good client, we'll be like, hey, here's my cell phone. If you have any last thing, because at that point, the wedding's planned. We're not worrying about losing some piece of information. Then they're like, oh my gosh, I have your cell phone. It's like special to them to get it.
I do it also at the very end. I'm like, okay, we've made it. Here's my cell phone number. Same.
Now, let me tell you why we do it. It's not because we need it. There's only one reason why we do it. Maybe two. But the main reason is we want their phone so that we could send them behind the scenes photos the day after the wedding.
Yes.
And get the little screenshots from them that say, oh my gosh, Tirzah, it was the best day ever. You did so well. And then we could be like, hey, I'm so glad it was the best day of your life. Can you please just pop over to this link and give us a review? Yes. I mean, that's literally like we're just only giving them the cell phone so that we could get that. And then when we're sending them all of these behind the scenes photos, it just gives them all the warm fuzzies, and it's just like a next level thing. Anyway, I will stop talking for now, but there's smart ways to do it.
Here's Professor Kalli. I'm going to repeat this because audience, number one, that nugget that she shared, I'm going to be implementing that right away. Is like that quick, hey, before your tour, please send this over to mom and dad. Nugget one. And then that nugget two, that yes, I do the same at the very end. I'm sending that cell phone number out. And yes, there's so many helpful reasons at the end, and you can mold that to your own business. But I agree. Those two nuggets are well worth your listen today. I'm excited. I listened to that first one.
It doesn't matter how long we've been doing this. And I, as an educator, I'm sure you agree with this. It's like, if you're not continuing to grow in these spaces, you're gonna lose track really fast of what's happening. Like, you have to keep your pulse on the new and up, even like you said, you're a tools lady, like the tools are just getting better and better that we have. And I just was doing a podcast a little bit earlier today with someone that is creating an amazing tool for venue owners. I'm just like, hey, can you hurry up? I need that tool. So anyway, talk to me about vendor relationships with being a kind of just the venue only. I think that, sometimes people assume that it's just like the Wild West, when you're a venue only. And I know that you have that dialed in really well. So tell me how you created your vendor kind of relationships and what that looks like for your clients.
So Tirzah, that's exactly how it all started, was an email called, I literally still have the template because it's a memento from the early days, pre or just at the beginning of Instagram, that's titled Vendor Relationship. So right away, whenever Instagram started coming out and we all looked around and were like, oh my gosh, I realized very quickly I was going to live or to die by my photographer relationships. And so I dialed in really quickly on calling it a vendor relationship. So this is how I would say my vendor systems all started, was this idea that we're about to move into this world of Instagram and needing content that isn't our own content. And so really early during those days, it wasn't common for photographers to send galleries. Obviously, it was very uncommon. No one did that at the beginning. That's a whole new thing. And of course, it's got tons of politics now. But it also was, you didn't know, can I go to Facebook and download this image and share it? And so there was just this whole thing. And so I very quickly created this long email. It's so long, but I still think there's some nuggets in this email, and I still kind of live by this email. I'm past this, but if you're new at this stage and thinking, okay, I really want to start reinvesting in my core recommended vendors and how that impacts my business down the line, I started sending this email to photographers who I didn't know, who were going to be shooting at my venues. And it's basically said, in a nutshell, I'm going to work for you. I'm the venue, and I'm going to go to work for you. You're going to come and shoot a wedding at my venue. And if you send me their gallery, I'm immediately going to go to work for you. I'm going to share those images, and this is how I'm going to share them. I'll, of course, always credit, because you just got to be straightforward, because it's just important to put it in there. I'm going to credit, I'm going to tag, I'm going to do all the things, but I'm also going to do X, Y, and Z. At the time, that didn't include blogging, but it does now. Even when I send these kind of informational emails, it does now, that I'm going to provide this backlink to you via email. And then for me, then and now, my rule has remained at 5. I don't recommend a vendor publicly unless 5 5-star reviews from my couples have come through. I keep a list, and I would explain this in detail and say, this is your first chance. I can't wait to get the gallery. I can't wait to share these images. From me sharing these images, it's going to bring you to my venue sooner. As soon as you hit 5 and it's 5-star, you're going on my website. I'm going to be shouting my name from the rooftops. But here's the important part. I actually followed up on all of this. I recognized right away, if I'm not providing value to this vendor, they're never going to get it. And they still don't get it, Tirzah. I'm sure you have the same. I mean, I know all vendors do. I'm like, and of course they're on their own podcast and their photography podcast going, why are vendors asking for this? And why don't they do this and this and this? Why don't they jumpstart, put us on their list? We all have our angles to this. But at the crux, I still encounter vendors constantly who do not understand that it is beneficial. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And of course, there's responsibilities on the venue side to make sure we're doing that with transparency, with credit, and in the best light for the vendor, and with good intentions. Because at the end of the day, my intention is true. If I can get a vendor to my venue regularly, my venue just got better. My content just got better. My systems just got better. My staff just had a lot of worry taken off of their shoulders. So I did the work early on to create a really strong recommended vendor list. Now, I just talked about it with photographers, but I did this with everyone, down to the cake lady. I mean, it was like all the way. And I would tell you that the data now, 12 years, 13 years into this, is like astronomical. Most of my couples, when I get their vendor sheets, it's 70% my recommended vendors. And so I don't have to track down COIs for any of those people. I don't have to communicate with any of those people. I don't have to send directions to any of them. My in-house coordinators don't. It's just, it makes everything so much better. So I would say that just focusing on building that relationship. I love that you said that vendor relationship, because that's what I call it. And it's not a recommended list. It's not this, because it's a whole relationship. It's got to stay good throughout the whole process.
We used to call it, and we've moved away from it in the last year, because confusion is, it causes resistance and all that kind of stuff, and they didn't understand it. But for probably 4 or 5 years, what the typical people would call a preferred vendor list, we called it, because my venue is Alexander Homestead, we called it Friends of the Homestead, because I wanted people to understand that these were relationships, that these were long-term, like vetted relationships. They are literally our friends. And it was like one of the better things I think that we had done. But again, because people don't read and their IQ is just a little diminished in the last few years, like people just don't understand. I went through this whole thing, and I'm like, I want everything to be as if a 5th grader could understand it.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we will be okay. Our website, our social media, all of our contracts and paperwork, if a 5th grader can understand it, then maybe these people can. But one of the things I'll say before we get on to another topic is, one thing that we've instituted that has just been so helpful is that we have an FAQ sheet and vendor agreement that every single vendor has to sign. And it saves time for us. I remember I had a mentor once, and he said, if you've ever repeated the same thing 3 times, you got to make a video or some type of document so that you're not repeating yourself, because it's just too exhausting. So we have videos. We have a hidden page on our website where we have all of this information. So if they are asking us something, we could pop them there. But for the vendors specifically, we have one for DJs. All the catering has to be done through us, so not that, but all of the outside vendors have a specific one for them. Hey, DJ,
Agreed.
this is
Same.
where you come. This is how long you have to set up. This is how long you have to break down.
Yeah.
And not just that, but then they have to sign it. Well, guess what happened? This happened 2 weeks ago. I told the story on a previous podcast about this bonkers DJ that we had. Well, he was giving us total crap, and he's like, I never saw anything about the timeline. I never saw anything about, when I'm supposed to load in. We literally took the form that he signed through DocuSign and just bopped it to him. We were like, oh, we're sorry you forgot. Here it is, And then there was no apology. I kind of wish there had been. But it also covers our butt too, right?
Tirzah, if you don't mind, I would love to add just one like you did with mine earlier. So agreed. I'm the same. I think there's a wave of venues out there who have vendor agreements, and I would say that's, if not the most foundational part of my venue, I swear it is. It's so important, is the vendor agreement. And the reason is, here's another big part of it that I love about my vendor agreement. All vendors who are not on my list have to be pre-approved. And I talk about this on the tour. It's not a personal thing. It's just this vendor agreement. And the reason it is because it puts me and the vendor in contact. And so now my DJ who's never been there isn't asking my bride where the outlets are, or the cake lady asking her how big the refrigerator is. I want none of that to go to my couple. I want none of that to go to them. I want it all to come to me. And here's even more important, if there's a grievance, I want it to come to me, not to my couple. So now I've created this channel of communication between a vendor, which before I instituted all that years ago, it was always coming through the bride. Oh, my DJ's upset about this, or my planner doesn't know the details about this. And you just take all of that away. The vendor agreement is truly one of the keystone foundations to my venue's success, for sure.
Oh my gosh. I'm so I'm so excited. I feel like we could talk about vendors for like a whole episode alone. Sure. But I just actually did a training with NACE, National Association of Caterers and Events. Mm-hmm. It's a foundation that's been around, an association since the 1950s or something. And they asked me to speak, and I was like, I have a topic I want to bring to you. I'm not sure how y'all are going to feel about it, but the title of it was How to Play Nice with Venues.
Yes, I saw that.
And
very good.
Girl, it was funny. I mean, like there was points in my presentation where they were looking at me and I'm like, I don't know how they feel, but I'm just going for it. It was a really great training actually, and people loved it. But one of the key things that I was telling them was that a venue doesn't owe you anything. You can't come to a venue and assume that they should have to put you on your vendor list. And I just want to say this to venue owners listening. If you don't take anything else from this podcast today, you have to vet your people, because they are a reflection of your business, your brand. Like, they are out there in the world, like, either helping or hurting you. And so you have to vet them. And just because someone comes to you and asks to be on a preferred vendor list doesn't mean that you have to say yes. It doesn't. Be protective of that.
And write it down. That's my five-star review. I break that rule for amazing vendors. But if it's a vendor who's just pushing, I'm like, well, number one, I have this rule, and I've already explained that rule to you. And it's an easy way to say, I have to have 5-star, and they're just not going to get there, or it's going to take 10 years or whatever. Having a written, it's almost like you're having a contract with yourself. Like, I'm not going to say yes to everybody who wants to be on my vendor list, because I have already published this rule to other vendors, and I'm going to hold
especially
to it.
If you don't have a financial kind of give and take relationship with that vendor. This is the compensation. Not all compensation is money, right? Like, these vendors that are out in the world representing you, tagging you in the Facebook groups, I'm looking for a venue, and they're immediately thinking of Kalli. That is monetary eventually, right? But there has to be a give and take, and not just from the side of the venue. Like, that was the other thing that I was telling these people at NACE, is I was like, you need to be out there before they even ask you, marketing, posting, doing a blog about why you love working at that venue. Like, you need to show them that it's a worthy relationship, because you can't assume that they're just going to hand you. Listen, we all pay like multiple 5 figures, and marketing a year, right? Like we're spending money marketing our venue. They just take 5 minutes and give us a review or make a post specifically about our venue. Oh my gosh, I'm digressing. We have to move on. But this is good. This is topic. Fire. It's so good. It's so good. Okay, I end with 2 questions. One, I want to hear about how you balance your family in this entrepreneurial life that you have, and I resonate so much with it. How do you balance your family? And then 2, give us any just closing thoughts that you have for listeners today.
Sure. Balancing with family is definitely a key to, my current state of life. And I'm so blessed. Like God just lined it all out for me. When I made the transition, I guess that was 3 or 4 years ago, to full-time, this is all I do, venues. I've moved away from my other work. This is what I do now as my primary focus. That was also coinciding, of course, with having a family. So I have a 5-year-old and an almost 3-year-old this weekend, and the venue world, and what I tell the people that I'm training when I just moved someone up in management, and she has a little boy, and I'm like, listen, there's a time and a place for all different type of work. But this kind of work where you can have control over your schedule, there is no greater financial compensation. I could never find a job, even if I was given a dream job, whatever that would be. It cannot compete with a job where I work the hours I want. And for me right now, that's a lot of late night. I have little kids, and I love that I can work from 9 to 3, and then I can bust my tail again from 9 to midnight. That is what works for me right now. Now, in a couple of years, I'm going to be past that, and I'm going to be excited for a different level. So one thing that's great about venue ownership is that, yes, I do have flexibility. Once you get over, like I was saying at Shiraz, is like building that team, of course, is key. And just in the last year at Sparrow Creek, I've gone ahead and built my sales team. Now, I resisted that so much because Sparrow Creek's romance is a lot about my own original story and my dad's story. We run it together. I know you absolutely resonate with that. A lot of the magic is that it's a father-daughter business and that we enjoy it together. And there's just a little magic there when I'm giving the tours. Now, it's been a year now and my sales team is doing fantastic. It's amazing whenever we're like, oh, no one can do it like I can. And then they do,
then they do better sometimes.
And then they do, of course. So creating that sales team, and that's something else that in this venue space, I think we can have a lot of creative models on commissions and other options that allows us to build teams that work within our own business. So mine are definitely small businesses, definitely lean times for sure, but I'm able to create these teams around that support my own family and lifestyle, that allows me to have a lot of mom time and flexibility with those teams that we build. That. So I think so.
I love that. And it's seasons, right? And I love to tell people, like, there's not freedom necessarily in running a venue, but there is flexibility, and that is not something that a lot of jobs these days give us. And it's the flexibility to not have a boss telling us when I could take a day off or go on a field trip with my kid or whatever. So no freedom, because when the water heater goes out, who's going to fix it? Who's going to be calling the repairman? It's us. Like, it all falls on us. So there is a lot of flexibility for sure. So give us some final thoughts for the listeners today.
I think what we talked about today was something that I just love and that I'm passionate about. If you don't already resonate with this, let this be something that guides you as you talk to vendors and other businesses and even your clients. Venues are little bitty chambers of commerce on our own. We are the ones who are bringing hundreds, if not thousands of people to our towns and cities from out of town, filling our hotels, filling, work for caterers and florists and all of this. We are our own little chamber of commerce, and be about everyone else. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, and that's definitely out there in marketing, but when I am promoting other businesses, I am always so surprised and not surprised that I get tons of positive feedback about that. So like I mentioned whenever I started in those early days, recognizing, oh my gosh, Instagram is here. I need content. Before I asked for galleries, I'm only asking for that gallery way at the bottom. First, I'm saying, what can I do for you? I'm going to go to work for you. For my hotels in my towns, I say, hey, Hyatt, hey, Middleton, hey, Wildcat, I am here to help you fill your rooms. What can I do for you? And then that reciprocity comes back. Then the referrals come. But step out knowing that you are a small chamber of commerce. You really are. And to go foot forward with everyone else's benefit on your mind, and then it will come back to you. I believe that wholeheartedly, that it will come back to you.
Oh my gosh, that is so well said. I love that little nugget of we are little chambers of commerce. That's a fantastic way to think about it. But Kalli, thank you so very much for being here. This was a fantastic conversation. I feel this way every episode where I'm just like, we could go on and on, but listeners, I know maybe your workout is done or your drive to work is almost done or whatever, you're doing the dishes, you only have so much time. But we really appreciate you taking the time to listen and just kind of hear another person being incredibly successful in the venue space. And I'm just honored to know you, Kalli, and I'm excited to keep cheering you on and can't wait to see what happens with your new third venue. I'm super excited about that. So as always, be sure to subscribe to my channel to be notified of future episodes. And if you would like to be a guest on my show, there's a link in our show notes to apply. And of course, please go and follow Kalli. We will put her Instagram links below. I was actually got kind of stuck in the scroll hole looking at her beautiful different pages that she has. So be sure and go give her a follow. But thank you again, Kalli, for being here. And for the rest of it, made it this far in our show, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.